Hey CJ, I hope you don't mind. We take a quick break from that. I will introduce
absolutely,
our
absolutely.
surprise guest.
Special guest. We got a special guest.
My brother Q, Anthony, and Midnight. Welcome.
What's good, man?
Sorry about the wait. Sorry about the wait. I was having some technical issues. Bro, listen, man. I've only been like tangentially aware of what's been going on. I saw that a couple of crackers were getting on. Oh, sorry, I guess I can't say that word on here. I saw a couple of Caucasian gentlemen were upset at Sabs for criticizing Joe Biden, basically saying that, you know, we told you that the rug pull on student loans was going to happen, which she fucking did. Like, I don't understand what the problem is. So why? Okay, so Joe Biden promised something that he knew he wasn't going to deliver on, which he was fully capable of delivering on the entire time, because as the president, the Secretary of Education is within his cabinet. And the Secretary of Education can unilaterally simply write off all federal student loans. And federal student loans are what, like, was it like 95% of all student loans or something like that? Somewhere between like 90 and 95% of all total student loans. So if he wanted to, he totally could. Like, this whole rigmarole with going through through Congress, he doesn't have to do any of that. He's not obligated to do that. So Sabs basically said, like, yeah, he never really intended on following through on this, which is just fucking true. And because of that, they come after her. Dog, I just
listen, because we was right, and Sam Cedar, like, they will say, oh, they will call anyone left to them, anyone left to Social Democrat, they will call them the dumb left. But they did not know this.
I noticed. I noticed how quick they are to call the intelligence of Black people into question the moment they start getting disagreed with.
Yes,
and not even just getting disagreed with, but the moment they start getting styled on, right? Like,
yes.
You know, you, me, Sabs, all of us were saying the exact same thing at that time, which is, if you really wanted to do something about student loans, because it started off with like $50,000, then it got worked down to $10,000 somehow, and then it had to go through Congress. And it's like, well, if he really wanted to do it, he knows what powers are enumerated to him as president. He simply can't do it. He just chooses not to. And I noticed that, like, whenever these people get rooked, like, there's this idea that entryism is somehow still a viable means of politics, and the failed Bernie Sanders campaign should tell you that there is no such thing as entryism when the party establishment can simply pull the rug out from underneath you whenever they want to. They can say, yeah, you know what? Fuck the rules. We're not going to do the rules shit. As a matter of fact, no, you're out. You're out. We're not letting you win. And that should have taught them a lesson immediately. But they're going to keep bringing people back to the same well to drink from, even though it's poison. And I used to think it was naivety. I don't think it's naive anymore. I think what it is like.
Uh-oh.
Oh, they hacked him. They got him.
He'll be back. I think it looked like he hit the button on the thing. There we go. Go ahead.
Not sure what happened there. Yeah, no, I used to think it was naivety. It's not naivety. These people are like, they're trying to exert pressure on the Democratic Party from the quote unquote left. That's not what they're doing. What they're basically saying is, okay, give us what we want. Like, we as in like this sort of sock dem, sort of like squishy centrist left, or whatever the fuck they call themselves. It's like, give us what we want, which is really what we want is just like basic healthcare and throw some student loans if you feel the need to do that. And after that, we'll leave you alone. And if you don't give us what we want, well, we can just let you get embarrassed by these people again. So really what it is that, like, people that are to the actual left are not there to build and maintain political power, at least as far as they're concerned. What they're there to do is to pose a threat, like to dangle a threat in front of the establishment and say, well, you can either negotiate with us or you'll negotiate with them, which is why every single time we've gotten it right on these issues, when we got it right on Russia, Ukraine, when we got it right on the Sanders campaign, when we got it right that AOC is a fucking fraud. All these examples where we show that, like, these people are not serious. They don't actually impose imperialism. They don't actually, not only do they not oppose capitalism, but they pose no threat to it whatsoever. They're working in lockstep with it. Yeah, there's no threat. Listen, if you're a threat to the system, then you're going to be actively monitored and engaged by the system. These people are not actively monitored or engaged. They're a joke. And I think that these, I don't know who the fuck the Humanist Report, I don't know what his name is, but yeah, them Kyle Kulinski types, like, that's pretty much what they're there to do. They're there to show Democrats, like, hey, yo, so you can either talk to us or you can talk to them, make a choice. And the reason that they're so quick, especially when it comes to Black leftists, because Black people in America and in the West generally know what type of time the government is on, what type of time the power establishment is on. which is that we have no interest in negotiating anything with you whatsoever. Our system depends on your oppression. That's just the way that it's going to stay. And I think what they do is they sort of leech off the radical energy that comes from our circles to try and invigorate and then cloak themselves in some air of like as if they're the same kind of radicals that we in the, not only us, but like the people whose like teachings, whose leadership we draw from, they want to act like they're a part of that. But it's like, no, because back when we were talking about Mumia Abu Jamal, back when we were talking about Monsanto, back when we were talking about Africom, y'all were talking about fucking atheism. Like, shut up. You know what I mean? Y'all were talking about new atheism or whatever the fuck. Like, I'm sorry. Like, these people are, what they're trying to do is to develop a, they're trying to develop a political theory of change that basically involves following the status quo, but putting on this air of, like, revolutionary politics. But really, all they're doing is relitigating their shitty relationship with their parents. Like Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden are nothing but mom and dad.
That's spot on. That's spot on. That's spot on.
All I can do is black. That's so on point. That's why I was so. You guys see why I was so hyped. Q joined this particular stream. So go ahead, Q.
No, man, no. Just and the other part is just like, how dare you talk to a black woman like that? Like, humble yourself. You would imagine all of us, like the four of us here and Sabs in a room together with these guys, I don't know, like maybe on a panel in front of a crowd or some shit, like, you know, in the kind of environment where we're making our points, talking to each other, and then somebody interjects. Do you think any one of them would they would even crack open their lipless mouths to call one of us a dipshit? Are you out of your mind?
And like, the funny thing is, these people they will pal around. If you look at Voss and these people that Vanguard and friendly, they will pal around with extreme right wingers like neocons when they hang out with Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin. They're like, yeah, we having a friendly bait. But then when they talk to black leftists, we're dipshits. We're fucking grifters. You guys see the different energy they have. They can talk.
How are you? First of all, how are you as a man worrying about how other people make money? That's first of all. And second, how are you, somebody who, again, like came from the new atheist movement and then somehow it like engendered yourself into this this energetic left atmosphere? How are you, especially with the amount of money that these kind of people are making, and not giving any of it back to communities, like not helping any emergent movements, not putting a highlight on anything that anybody is doing that is worthwhile? How do you have the nerve to call anybody a grifter? Like, the word doesn't mean, the word no longer means anything. The word grifter means, how dare people listen to you when my politics are better? That's really all the word means. And especially when it comes to black people, dog, they don't like us having our own theories of revolutionary change. They don't like the fact that the people that they can only reference in passing but have never actually read or understood them. They'll talk about Frantz Fanon occasionally. They'll talk about Fred Hampton. They'll talk about the Black Panthers. They'll talk about all this revolutionary shit all day. But when the rubber hits the road, like, does anybody know who they are in the communities? Do people, like, have they actually done anything for our people? Can they even, do they even know any of the do they know the political prisoners that have been released in the past year? Have they brought any attention to them whatsoever? It's basically just a bunch of white people sitting around, like, you know how like China watchers will just like sit around and watch like whatever he's doing. It's like, yo, I noticed niggas doing. He's up to something evil, man. He's about to invade Taiwan like next week, bro. You heard it from me first. Yeah, that's what they do to black people. They sit around and watch the conversations that we have with each other, and they want to jump in and monitor our conversations.
Yes,
Like, how dare you talk about I didn't listen.
Yes,
you big-lipped moon cricket. I didn't give you permission to talk about that. You know what I'm saying? Like, bro, I honestly, listen, I don't know if you saw how, like, first of all, they try to come from my neck. Why? Because I said based on like the history between black people and European Jews, I can understand why Kanye West is feeling paranoid. Bro, they called me Hitler, they called me a Nazi, they called me this, that, and the third. There was like some Jewish dude, I forget what his name is, but he, like, you know, he's got like an anonymous profile, but, you know, he posted a video of Louis Farrakhan just like giving the business to Mike Wallace back in the 1980s when Mike Wallace had that interview where he talked about Nigeria. Yeah, and they got upset. They're like, how dare you promote Louis Farrakhan? How dare you platform Louis Farrakhan? It's like, nigga, if you don't shut the fuck up. Listen, when Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam were taking brothers off the street getting to them in prisons, getting to them in homeless shelters, right? Talking to them on street corners. And it took them from like homeless people and gangbangers and inmates and made them into men that could hold their heads up high and say, I am a black man. When you look at me, you are looking at God, as said the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. They did more for black people's self-respect and self-image at that period of time in like the post-civil rights, like, the post-assassination or exile of like every major black political leader throughout the 1980s and back when like Jesse Jackson was on some Rainbow Coalition shit, like, stealing from the stealing the Black Panthers language to try and talk about how it is that he's going to build a coalition of African Americans. Keep in mind, he was the one that came up with that shit. Everybody else called themselves black. He came up with African Americans. We had like a misleadership class that was telling black people that you have to assimilate. You basically have to become the Cosby family. Otherwise, we're leaving you behind because y'all niggas is on crack. Like, this is like during the height of the crack era. And what did the Nation of Islam do? The resurgent Nation of Islam, they used, like, Louis Farrakhan used to go on every single talk show that he could, talking about how it is that black people need to have self-respect and hold their heads up high and not let themselves be told by white people that they come from nothing, that they're jungle bunnies, that we're mud people. He didn't do the whole kings and queens thing, but what he did was say that you are an anointed and chosen people, and you will go on to do great things in this world if you allow yourself the opportunity. That man did more for the collective black self-respect than anybody during that time period. And the Nation of Islam took people from selling crack to handing out Qurans and having becoming like pillars inside of their community. So as much as people want to hash on about like how he's anti-white or anti-Semitic or whatever the fuck, listen, you don't get to tell us who it is that we revere and respect. Get the fuck out of here, bro. You want to tell me like they have people like they talk about like people like Menachem Begin, right? Who was one of the architects of the 1948 Nakba. They have people that participated in the Sabra and Shatila massacre, and they'll praise them openly. Who has Louis Farrakhan ever harmed in his life that was Jewish? Has he ever harmed a hair on a Jewish person's head? Absolutely not. Just like Kanye West hasn't harmed a hair on a Jewish person's head. But I'm telling you, dog, when we have conversations between ourselves, we have intra-community conversations, they believe that they have the right to police how we have those conversations. And I was like, sorry, man. Like, listen, I know that a lot of us were friends during the 2020 election. And hey, even though Bernie wasn't the perfect candidate, best that we got going right now, let's just let's band together. And then once that campaign died, all of that disparate energy just like flew in all different directions. And now you have people that rather than going after people continuously on the right and holding the people in power both accountable, like responsible for what they promised to us, but also actually trying to pull them left, they're attacking people on the left and they're attacking black people. How dare you speak to anybody black? Every lick of every word that comes out of your mouth right now that talks about imperialism, that gives a substantive critique of capitalism. Every word that comes out of your mouth that talks, if you're talking about Farrakhan, if you're talking about the war in Iraq, where did that critical revolutionary energy come from in the 1970s? That shit came from black people. And if they had been around during the late 1960s and early 1970s, when the Black Panther Party was really popping, they would be saying the same thing. Why are you sympathizing with these radicals? They're violent. Don't you know they kill people? They kill police officers that are just trying to protect their family. Man, fuck you. You don't have to listen to none of these people, dog. None of them. None of them have the answers. None of them have any None of them have any substantive theory of change. It's just get behind the Democrats and hope they'll actually hand us out cookies. And when it comes to anything that the Democrats owe to black people, when it comes to any critiques of the Democrats, how they've been committing out, like either aiding and abetting or committing out and out genocide, the Middle East, North Africa, how they've been blocking East African countries from getting grain shipments. How they've been telling the continent of Africa that, hey, if you don't get on board with us funding Nazis, we're going to lower your foreign aid, and we may even like cut you off. We may even sanction you.
And you know, it was literally only the black.
You want us to get behind these people?
Like we covered that. We covered how the United States was trying to weaponize political aid to get Africa on board with their genocidal war. None of these white commentators talked about that. Like none of these white commentators talk about Biden.
I think the only person, you know who the only person I heard was that talked about that? Fucking Jimmy Dore. And then they want to act like Jimmy Dore is a problem. No, listen. If you don't like Jimmy Dore's point of view on like the Boogaloo Boys, or you don't like Jimmy Dore's point of view on the vaccines, I'm sorry. Like that to me has done a lot less harm than you throwing your energy and your voice behind the man that is single-handedly responsible for taking almost 1 in 10 black men off the streets from 1994 to now. Almost 1 in 10 black males during that time was incarcerated, came in contact with the criminal justice system, and now it's projected that of all black men alive right now, 1 in 3 will have some meaningful contact with the criminal justice system. That was orchestrated by Joe Biden. You want to tell me you don't like Jimmy Dore's opinions on this, that, or the third group. You want to call him a fascist. But at the very same time, you expect me as a black person to have any respect or any, like, I'm going to temper my expectations of this fucking bigot? You got to be out of your goddamn mind. They have United States military presence in Haiti right now. Not because there's like a tyrannical seizing of power that's been happening in Haiti for the last 6 years, not to dislodge them from power, a problem that the United States created in the first place when they basically kidnapped Jean-Bertrand Aristide and replaced them with a military dictatorship. No, they're not going in to clean up their own mess. They're going there to suppress the people's voice because they haven't had free and fair elections. You know what I mean? You want me to trust the man that had his border guards chasing down black men, women, and children on horseback and fucking whipping them and then deporting them back to Haiti after the earthquake devastated? You want me to trust him? And you want me to denounce Jimmy Dore? Man, go fuck yourself. Kyle Kalinske or Humanist Report or any of these motherfuckers, Vosh, I don't really give a shit who none of them are. Bro, listen. If you have a problem with me promoting Louis Farrakhan, if you have a problem with me criticizing European Jews for trying to tell the black people that we are the face of anti-Semitism, nobody black has ever institutionally oppressed Jewish people anywhere in the world, ever. It has never happened. It has especially not happened in the United States. But Jewish people owned slaves. Jewish people, European Jews. And when I say Jewish people, I want to be very careful because I'm not talking
European Jews.
Turkish Jews or Syrian Jews or Beta Israel in East Africa. I'm talking about European Jews, the Ashkenazi and the Sephardim, them specifically, overrepresented in the slave trade. And I'm not talking about like some sort of secret plot to finance the slave trade or control it. No, I'm talking about the people that were actually putting their hands in black men and women and children's mouths to inspect their teeth and groping their genitals and their buttocks to inspect them for sale, to assess their market value. Those people were the ones that came out of Portugal and Spain in 1492. They came to the Americas, and the economy that they were able to ingratiate themselves into because they were dispossessed of capital and land was they acted as brokers for slaves. They were overrepresented in this. In Brazil, in Jamaica, in Suriname, in Barbados, in Guyana. Like, this is actual documented history, and Jewish historians have recorded this. And yet you want to say, you want to police how black people have mourned the loss of their own history and are trying to reclaim it? Like, I'm not saying that like any of these people, whether it's like Kyrie or Kanye or anybody, I'm not saying that they have answers or that they have some sort of like deep knowledge that they're being made privy to that was hidden from us. What it is like, for Kyrie at least, it's a black man trying to work out the absence of his own history in real time. And of course he's going to fuck up and make mistakes, but all he did was tweet some shit, bro. And yet, somebody brings up Louis Farrakhan the day after he gives a powerful speech basically saying, how dare you, after what you've put us through, after the hell that you've given us throughout our existence in the West, want to talk to us about us being anti-Semitic? The day after that happened, some dude posts a video of Louis Farrakhan giving Mike Wallace the business, and they want to cancel him. The guy's Jewish. Like, dog. Like, honestly, these people are not. They talk about themselves as being like leftists. They talk about Stalin and Lenin and all this shit all day. They want to have these endless debates and conversations about dead European men. I really couldn't care less about none of that shit, bro. I just want my people to be free. And if you can't get on board with that, you're not my comrade. You're not my friend. And so I notice how like that energy, when it gets directed at Sabs and when it gets directed at you all, they want to call you grifters. They want to act as if like you're dishonest brokers, like you're leading people astray. You are black people operating in a left political milieu when the black body politic is practically non-existent right now. And you're giving people like a North Star to be guided by. You're actually giving people like historical materialism, and you're giving actual analysis and theories of change. You're talking about revolutionary history and how it applies to the current day. And these people are talking about how Joe Biden can be brought left and how we have to like get more seats in the Senate. Man, fuck all these crackers. I'm sorry. Every single one of them from the bottom of my heart, fuck all these crackers. They do not care about us. All they care about is using our bodies and our energy when it suits them. And the moment any of them steps out of line, get back to work, nigger. Get the fuck out.
I told you guys, CJ, the Declaration of War.
I have a question for Q though. I want you to chime in on the question that's part of our thumbnail, which is how petty bourgeois politics prevent the liberation of workers or black people, if we want to narrow it down. Like, how do you basically the moderate white person that Malcolm and Martin have talked about? Can you speak to that or talk about that?
Well, I mean, like Malcolm X was very clear. Like he talks about the fox and the wolf. That you run away from the wolf, and then you run into the jaws of the fox, right? And that's what like the flock of black people have for the last like 45, 50 years been running into the jaws of the fox, as a flock, because liberals seem like they like us, and I'm sorry, but there's a rampant self-esteem problem where it comes to, I would say, like a lot of younger black people, but I think Gen X also had this problem where it's like, as long as white people will tolerate you in their space, then they deserve something for it. Like they deserve to be applauded or congratulated for it. And what that's led to is remember during the 2020 campaign, right? Like I had all of these social justice, these black blue check influencers that were flocking to like Elizabeth Warren's campaign. Some of them went to Joe Biden's campaign, but early on they weren't for that. They went to like, they were like with Elizabeth. Oh, man, I forget who even fucking ran in that campaign. There was like 20 odd different candidates, but they went to these liberal and centrist candidates, and anybody that was criticizing Elizabeth Warren's votes, or anybody that was criticizing Joe Biden and his like history of like imperialism and anti-blackness, anybody that was like standing up against that and was black, you notice that the first people to try and get the rest of us in line. Oh yeah, this was Kamala Harris especially. Like this is especially true of her. When people were talking about her record of imprisoning or like putting the parents of truant children in contact with the justice system, or that she was imprisoning people on marijuana arrests, or that she was like denying trans inmates the ability to transition while they were incarcerated. And people were bringing that stuff up, and it was like, "Oh, you're just misogynist. You're misogynoirist. Like you just don't want to see a black woman succeed." And it's like, how low is your self-esteem that you have to you have a personal investment in seeing somebody like that exceed to the highest powers, like the highest office, and some of the most powerful seats in the entire world. And they do the same thing right now with AOC. They do it with Ilhan Omar. And they're doing it with Bernie Sanders, and that's that they ascribe a kind of radical energy to these people that they never claimed to have in the first place. And I don't even like talking about this whole what is the petty bourgeoisie and what is the actual workers movement, because to be frank, there hasn't been a coherent workers movement in the United States probably since like the collapse of the Communist Party in the post HUAC years. What we have now is a group of disparate elements that sometimes work in tandem, but oftentimes not, and a labor aristocracy that essentially exists to like consume the energy of smaller labor movements, like the Amazon Workers Union or the Starbucks unions. What this the current labor aristocracy exists to do is to sap all of the radical energy out of those movements and systematize them. So I think that it's almost like not even all that useful to talk about these things, because these lines are not made very clear. A lot of people, like I see people talking about whether Starbucks workers are even workers, or whether they're petty bourgeois or some shit like that. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you guys have lost the fucking plot. Here's the long and short of it. Do you have to sell your time and your body for labor? Because if the answer is yes, unless you are independently wealthy and you don't actually have to exchange your labor for money, then yeah, you are a worker. Like that's just the long and short of it. You might be a different type of worker. You might be like a white collar worker. You might be a blue collar worker. But the fact of the matter is you're still a worker. Now, when people are getting into these side conversations about like whether Starbucks workers are actually workers, then I think the conversation on like petty bourgeois elements, it's done. It's fucking dead. It's basically just like people.
I missed that. I didn't hear that. Q. I didn't hear that part about. I didn't hear about the Starbucks. But I'm not as plugged in. I'm not as plugged in. But I didn't hear that about Starbucks workers.
Yeah, there's a big debate. People always, there's always this debate. Q, and that's what Q was talking about. You see it all the time with people like X is not a real working class person. I'm like, I always see like.
I just see police. I just see the police as the only people not part of the working class. That's the only one.
Right. Well, I mean, you can always. I mean, with police, it's pretty hard and fast because the question is this: when a strike breaks out in any other sector besides policing, what side of the picket line do you usually find the police on? You know what I mean? So you can just say straight up like they're not workers, like they're fast traders. But the reason I say like I kind of like veer away from this type of a conversation is because the lines are not very clear at all. Because I think we try to engage in this sort of like, I don't know, like this Manichaean duality where like there's the worker, the good guys, and the petty bourgeois, the bad guys. Well, I mean, in every revolution throughout history, you've had some of the elements of the bourgeois and many of the petty bourgeoisie that align with the workers in revolutionary movements. This happened during the Haitian Revolution. This happened during the Bolshevik Revolution. So the question isn't like who qualifies as a worker, and only the workers can be a part of anything. And then this endless quest for the correct position to basically whittle down the definition of a worker to like the imagination of one person, what they think a worker is, right? What it really is supposed to be is, do we understand what the ruling class is? Do we understand what their agenda is? And do we oppose it? Do we want liberation for workers and people generally? If the answer is yes, then you're fucking with us. And I'm never going to accept anybody that was part of any new atheist movement to try to tell me like, you know, what is the petty bourgeois, what is not, and who we should follow politically. As far as I'm concerned, man, like they're all compromised. Like fuck off.
What's that, wrong, CJ?
Yeah. Oh, you can go ahead, CJ.
Oh shit. What I wanted to do, so there's have you ever heard of Vivek Jabir? Jabir, have you ever heard of Vivek? He's a Marxist.
Vivek Jabir. Yeah.
Yes. I'm sorry. I may be saying his name incorrectly.
Yeah.
But I'm curious.
CJ, sorry, CJ. Before we move on to the next part, can I just, CJ, well, where can they find you? Where you're at? Just because I know this was the last second, and I want to give you a proper chance because I saw some people in the chat asking. And your podcast too. I know I'm gonna be joining you on Thursday sometimes, right? So just do a quick shout out and just so people know where they can find you and they have a guide that we are.
I know he just kind of slided it right in the conversation, like he was already.
You.
Oh shit!
Bro, we got a show. Bro, the show on Thursday, fool.
Yeah.
YouTube channel you were talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can find me on the Unredacted. Yeah, my name is Q Anthony Omeni, co-host of the Unredacted podcast. You can find me on there on Call-In Thursdays. Excuse me, Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. And you can find my writings in like various publications, Washington Post, Maclean's, wherever. Although I'm doing a lot less writing now, and I'm focusing more on like video journalism and content production. So yeah, you can find me on the Unredacted podcast. And then once the Culture Report launches, you can find me there too.
Yeah, and I'll be joining Q every once in a while on Thursdays